we are demanding that all children of Kenya be admitted to the best schools on merit. And I'm not saying children from this area or any other area who are not qualified or who have not met the minimum points that are required should be admitted to these great institutions. I am saying, and parents have asked me to say so, that all children of Kenya should be given an opportunity on merit. We used to have a very good system of placement of our kids into secondary schools. Principals would gather at the Kenya Science Teachers College, and they are given all the pupils who apply to go to those institutions. Then a committee would agree on the cutoff point, and the principals would make the choices and place the children accordingly. This is no longer the case. The placement of our children has been centralized at Jogoo House, which has brought in corruption, because the bureaucrats sitting at Jogoo House have no capacity to know how to place kids. That is why we have a crisis where kids have been placed in a day school 300 kilometers away from their homes. How do people expect these children to go about their lives? If it's a girl aged 13 years and she has been placed in a school 200-300 kilometers away from home, the parents would have to go and get a house, a rented room for that girl and leave her there. Again, the parents would spend a lot of money. So we have a crisis, we have a mess. I heard William Ruto saying that it has been done very well. He doesn't live in this country anymore. He should know and hear the outcry of parents. Parents are spending thousands of shillings trying to take their children far away from home to day schools, look for accommodation, look how they'll be eating, how they'll be cooking. It's a crisis of unknown magnitude. We are saying that it is not right to admit any child to a day school outside a walking distance. And when the principals were doing it, it was done properly because the principals know the catchment area of the secondary school, and then they will do 3, 4, 5 kilometers only. But we have a situation where kids in Machakos have been admitted in a day school in Kericho. How does that child survive? This is not right. This is unnecessary. The issues I raised, and I want to be very clear, is that all children in Kenya deserve equal treatment. National schools are very critical because they have very developed infrastructure and they attract the best among our children. The issue that I raised, and I would like to continue raising it, is that there must be fairness in the placement of children in national schools. I have not insisted, and I cannot, that children of a certain area must go to schools where those schools are domiciled. No. What I'm saying is, where the schools are domiciled, children from that area who qualify to go to those schools must be given an opportunity. I have examples. Parents have called me from Nyanza, near Gaos, Kamusinga High School, Mukumu Gaos, Machako School, Mulango Gaos in Kitui, St. Charles Wanga, Thika High School, where children from those areas who had applied to be considered to be admitted in those areas, in those schools, and attained the requisite marks were denied an opportunity. For example, there is a child from the Goto area who got 71 out of 72 marks. Alliance High School is just a few meters from the Goto. That child had asked to be placed in Alliance High School, and the cluster was right. That child was denied an opportunity. Yet some children from other areas with as low as 50 marks have been admitted to those institutions. That is what we are saying is unfair. It cannot be, you know. This placement must be based on merit. for all the children of Kenya. And I am saying it's unfair to deny a child an opportunity to go to a school of his or her choice with very high marks and give that opportunity to another child with very low marks. That I'm saying is unfair, it's uncalled for. Over the last few days, there has been a national discourse on the admission of our children to grade 10, of our children in grade 10 to our secondary schools. I wish to weigh in and say as follows. President Mwai Kibaki, the third president of the Republic of Kenya, a champion of education and development in Kenya, and President Uhuru Kenyatta massively developed the education sector in Kenya, particularly in infrastructure and development. Through the due process, we had free primary education, free secondary education for day schools, and without doubt, the education sector has grown steadily even as our population and development priorities grow as a nation. However, some unfortunate truths and discussions must be held now for prosperity, introspection, and national audit. We must be alive to the fact that our Constitution of Kenya 2010 gifted us devolution, which took off in the year 2013. At the same time, the Constituency Development Fund, now National Government CDF, came into action in the year 2004. Hitherto, several funds have been channeled to our counties and constituencies since then to develop our villages, towns, and where we all come from. This was meant to bridge development gaps and create equity. I take note that since the year 2013, the 47 counties in Kenya have received a total of 4 trillion transfers from the national government to county governments as part of the shareable revenue. This does not include county-owned source income. Further, since 2004, CDF has received about 500 billion channeled to our constituencies and mostly going to the development of education. Various legal provisions detail how these monies must be spent. A top on education and more infrastructure development. When I raise the issue of unfairness in the criteria used to admit children in our 106 national schools countrywide, I have received overwhelming information and support countrywide. I have received overwhelming information and support from Kenyans across. Since revenue is shared equitably, why would some regions in Kenya have national schools that exist by name? They just a shell by themselves. Why would a certain member of parliament or governor or a community invest in the education sector and others don't? Let leaders from northern Kenya not lecture us about affirmative action. Devolution has been in place since 2013. And leaders from those regions deliberately have refused to develop institutions. Yet they want their children to enjoy the facilities of institutions that have been put by other leaders in other counties. Since 2013, Wajir County has received 99.6 billion Kenya shillings. Marsabit County has received 76.83 billion. Garissa County has received 81.7 billion shillings. Mandera County has received 119 Kenya billion shillings. They have the opportunity to develop institutions of the highest standards possible in Kenya. Not just for the children of those areas, but for the children of Kenya. I traveled as deputy president to those areas, and I don't see any institutions, despite the massive funding that taxpayers have channeled to those counties. Yet in counties that have received less money, in Western Kenya, in Rift Valley, here in the mountain, when you go around, you see beautiful institutions. I want to say that we need to have a national conversation about zoning of placement. This was okay then because some areas were marginalized. But these areas have received massive funding from the Equalization Fund. They have received massive funds from the National Kitty. CDF funds are shared equally among the 290 constituencies. Yet when you go to these areas where the leaders are making a lot of noise, there is nothing on the ground. In fact, when I was deputy president, I was shocked that these leaders from northern Kenya don't live there and they don't work there. Anytime I had a trip to Garissa, to Mandera, to Wajir, the leaders of those regions would demand that I make space available for them on my aircraft. I would go with them and come back with them. And I never saw any institutions there, despite the fact that billions of shillings have been given to those areas. So we are saying we need a national conversation to ask. Devolution was supposed to bring equity. Equitable allocation of CDA funds was meant to bring equity. 13 years down the line, is there really any county that requires affirmative action anymore? We need to have that conversation. For how long are we going to have affirmative action? Because devolution was meant to address the inequality and the marginalization of certain regions.